Let's talk about one of our very important sections in science, and that is digestive system. Of course, without our digestive systems, we won't be able to survive. So definitely one of the very important systems. Now this whole process starts from our mouth. This whole cavity of the mouth is what is known as the buccal cavity. So when we focus on the buccal cavity, what is the first thing that comes in? The tongue and the teeth. Now let's talk about the teeth first. So when we say teeth, there is few things that we need to remember. In human beings, we have heterodont teeth. Heterodont implies that there are different types of teeth. Now you are well aware what those are. So those are incisors, canines, premolars and molars, and based on this we have a dental formula. This dental formula for adult is 2123 by 2123, and that's on one side of the upper or the lower jaw. So on either side it's 2123 2123, and then on the lower side again 2123 2123. So you have the total number of teeth that you can simply add. So that's 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3, and that multiplied by 4, and that again multiplied. So that multiplied by 4 would give you the total number of teeth that are there. In the kids, what is the dental formula? The dental formula is 212 by 212, and there are no molars that are seen. So you have incisors, canines and premolars that are seen. So this is where we say the teeth are heterodont. The next important thing about the teeth is they are Thecodont. Thecodont means they are attached to the jaw. They are not hanging somewhere. They are firmly attached in the jaw. The next important thing is they are Diphyodont. Diphyodont, what does it mean? There are two stages in which human beings have teeth. One is the milk teeth and the other is the adult teeth. So three important characteristics of teeth that we have discussed. Now this structure of the teeth has the root and the crown section that is there. Most important thing about the whole of the buccal cavity is, with the teeth you have the process of chewing and grinding that starts. Now this food which is chewed and grinded goes through the esophagus or the food pipe, and the movement in the food pipe is what is known as a peristalsis movement. But what is very important is the role of tongue and the saliva that basically is located, the salivary glands which are located in three parts in the buccal cavity. One is the submandibular, which is in the mandible section. The next is sublingual, which is below the tongue, and the third is parotoid, which is present in the cheek. Now from all these you have the salivary amylase that is released, and this helps in breaking down of the food particle. The process of breaking down of the food particle in the mouth section is known as chyme in the buccal cavity. However, this process in the stomach is what is known as bolus. So again, very important. Then you have the tongue. The role of the tongue is important because this tongue is attached on the back side to a point which is known as frenulum, and it is where you have on the tongue you have small papillae. These papillae have taste bud. Four taste sensations that are there. So those are sour, bitter, sweet and salty. So four taste sensations that we have in our tongue, and then you have a common cavity here which is known as pharynx. So that is another next important thing, which is pharynx, and through this pharynx you have a cartilage which acts as a flap. It opens and closes, and you have the food that passes through. Since you have a common entry, so either you would have the food pipe that would open or the windpipe that would open. This flap plays a very important role. And what is this flap known as? It is known as epiglottis. So here are some of the key terms that we have discussed. The next important thing is beginning with the digestive system. So this stomach that is there is divided into four different parts. The first part, the topmost section of the stomach, is known as fundus. This is usually filled with air and gas. The next important part, where the esophagus actually opens is known as the cardiac section. This cardiac usually implies with heart, but it is called as cardiac because it is the heart of the stomach, the point where the esophagus opens up in the stomach. The next important section that we are talking about here is the body and the lowermost section, which is known as pyrolic. So those are the 4 important sections of the stomach. Now from the stomach you have the small intestine that is connected. The C section that you can see here is the part of the small intestine which is known as duodenum. Next to duodenum you have jejunum. So this portion is what is known as jejunum. And the last portion, which is highly coiled part of the small intestine, is known as ileum. So stomach divided into 4 components: fundus, cardiac, body and pyrolic. Cardiac is the section where you have the esophagus that opens. Fundus is filled up with air and gas, and the next is the small intestine where the absorption actually starts. So the first portion is the C-shaped portion which is known as duodenum. It is the broadest among the all. Then you have jejunum which absorbs most of the material, and finally ileum. Ileum is highly wavy structure where you have lot of villi that is present, and the most of the absorption of nutrient is done in the section of ileum. Most of the digestion that is done here is of glucose, fructose and fatty acids. So this is the small intestine. From the small intestine you have the large intestine that connects. The first part of the large intestine is known as cecum, and this cecum is one of the broadest part again. Then you have the colon. So this is whole of the large intestine surrounding the small intestine, as you can see. Now this colon is divided into 3 parts. You have the ascending that goes up. Then you have the transverse which moves parallel, and then you have the descending that moves downwards. So these 3 form the section of the colon, and finally you have the last section where you have the rectum. Now rectum is where you have finally all the absorption of the water, mineral, nutrients that takes place, and there is lubrication for the easy passage of the waste material that's there, and finally you have the anus towards the end. So this is where you have the whole of the digestive system that has been explained at a quick go. Now as we said, glands are very important. So in the mouth we had the salivary glands. Now saliva has certain very important components. Those are, first of all, it has lysosomes. Lysosomes has a capacity to kill any kind of bacteria in the mouth, and therefore we say saliva is antiseptic in nature, similar to a turmeric. The next important thing is saliva maintains an electrolytic balance in the body. So when you are dehydrated, what is given is an ORS solution, but that is something external. Our body has a capacity to maintain the electrolytes by themselves, and that is through the saliva. Now in the saliva, as we said, salivary amylase is released, and this amylase has a capacity to convert starch into maltose. So the pH is very important, and this pH is at around 6.8. So that is one of the important things. The next is, in the process of the food pipe, as we said, you have the movement through which the food particles go down, and this movement is known as the peristalsis movement. Now stomach has a capacity to hold the food for a significant amount of time, and there is where you have the process of time that occurs. Now here what we are trying to understand is the role and the functions. So pepsinogen converts into pepsin, and that is in presence of hydrochloric acid. So our stomach is acidic. That's why we say remaining empty for long hours is not a sensible decision, because there is acid that is released in the stomach definitely. So what is there is pepsinogen converts into pepsin, and that occurs in the presence of hydrochloric acid, or HCl that we call as. Then you have prorenin that converts into renin. You have proteins that convert into peptones. So all these are the ways under which food particle is broken down into simpler substances, those could be well absorbed by our body. Similarly, casein is broken down into paracasein, and this occurs in the presence of renin. So each of those are interlinked with the other. Again, the epithelial layer is very important. The epithelial layer has mucus as well as certain amount of bicarbonates that are present. These mucus and bicarbonates that are present basically helps in lubrication of the process, and with this lubrication you have better absorption and an alkaline medium that is generated. So the acidity of the stomach actually is reduced. Then in the stomach you also have gastric juices that are secreted. These gastric juices have a capacity to secrete lipase. So lipase is secreted by gastric juices. That is again a very important question. Then what is secreted in the small intestine? So bile, pancreatic juice and intestinal juice secrete in small intestine, and the pancreatic juice has the very important component which is known as trypsogen. So this is the trypsogen which is secreted from the pancreatic juice, and this trypsinogen is activated by enterokinase. Now enterokinase, which is secreted from the layer of intestine, basically converts the trypsinogen basically converts it into trypsin. So that is where you have the role of pancreatic juice, that is very important. Now duodenum, as we said, is again important. The role of duodenum is important because bile in the region of duodenum has bilirubin and biliverdin, but there is no enzyme that is present to emulsify the fats that are there. The next important thing is the organ that we talk about, which is the largest gland, and this is the liver. It usually weighs from nearly 1.2 to 1.5 kgs, and this is where you have bile that is produced, finally stored in the region of gallbladder. So you have gallbladder here and the liver here. Now liver has two different components that are there. The hepatic cells of the liver secrete the bile, and the lobes are connected by the Gilson's capsule. So that's again very important thing to understand. Now what actually happens is, from the gallbladder you have the gallbladder duct that is coming. From the liver you have the hepatic ducts that are coming. Together they form the CBD, which is the central bile duct or the common bile duct, and this common bile duct along with the pancreatic duct. So common bile duct, which include the duct coming from the gallbladder and the livers, is what is known as the common bile duct. This common bile duct along with the pancreatic duct, so another one more duct that joins here to the CBD, makes what is known as or opens up into the region of duodenum, which is the first section of the small intestine that we have already seen, and it's here where you have another duct that comes in, which is again important, and you have the duct which is known as the hepatopancreatic duct, and this is how you have the bile that is transferred from the liver to the gallbladder, finally to the small intestine, where you have most of the processes that takes place. Now pancreas, as we said, are a very important organ. This pancreas has two types of gland: exocrine glands and endocrine glands. Exocrine glands are those glands which are external. Endocrine glands are those which are internal or released directly into the bloodstream. So good example of endocrine glands are insulin and glucagon, which is released by pancreas. When it comes to exocrine, it's mainly the pancreatic juice along with enzymes that is released. So three major centers of digestive glands. One is the salivary glands, the other is the liver, gallbladder, where you have the bile, and the third is the pancreas. So this is how we understand the first section. Now as the food enters the intestine, you have the intestinal mucosa. Now intestinal mucosa has three things: active section, passive section, and facilitated transport. Facilitated transport is one where you have amino acid which is absorbed by the carrier proteins. So most of the substances in the blood are absorbed by the process of diffusion. So through the process of diffusion, you have absorption of most of the nutrient that occurs from the region of intestine. As we said, most of the particles are broken down into simpler forms. For example, protein broken down into dipeptide and finally into amino acids. So there is where is the role of pancreatic juice. You have fat which is broken down into monoglycerides in presence of bile. So there is where we call as the emulsification of fat that occurs. Now, maltose break down to glucose, sucrose break down to glucose, and fructose break down to glucose. What is the enzyme that is present? So for maltose, it is maltase. For sucrose, it is sucrase, and for lactose, it is lactase. So that is, and fructose, it is fructase. So it's very simple to remember. So it's just replacing O with A. So maltose, rather than O, you are replacing A. So it is maltase, which is the enzyme there. Now, the next important thing that we try to understand is the various layers. Now, in the process, you have four important layers that are seen. The outermost layer is known as serosa. Next to serosa, you have muscularis. Muscularis has two types of muscles, circular muscles as well as longitudinal muscles. So circular muscle basically helps in the movement within the region, and longitudinal helps it to push across and move the food particles further in the next section, as simple as that. The third is submucosa. Submucosa has presence of blood, nerves and lymph section. And finally mucosa, which has the villi. Now the idea is of the villi is to increase the surface area for the absorption. A very simple example is, I have a line here. Now how much this can absorb is on the upper surface and the lower surface. What I do is, I change this line to a kind of curved line which could be seen here. Now how much absorption could be done is much more. So you have absorption that could be done on the upper surface of it as well as the lower surface of it. If I straighten this whole line, it becomes much larger than the previous line. So the idea of villi is to increase the area of increase the surface for better absorption. So increase the surface area for absorption purpose. Again, if our whole of the digestive system is not functioning well, definitely there are various kinds of diseases that could come up. So jaundice, cholera, typhoid, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation are some of the diseases which are most commonly seen and associated with the digestive system. The next important thing is the issues of nutritional deficiency. So there are lots of nutritional deficiencies that occur. Two of the most common ones are marasmus and kwashiorkor, and these are known as PEM diseases, which is protein energy malnutrition diseases. Now marasmus is where a person would be very lean and thin. So marasmus, mara hua. So that's how you can remember it. A person is very lean and thin, usually seen in the age group of less than 1 year. If the mother's milk is replaced too early, there is where you have most of the cases of marasmus. Wrinkled skin and muscle wasting are the common symptoms. So under marasmus, protein deficiency is the foremost reason. However, under kwashiorkor, what happens is, it's not just the protein, but along with protein you have carbohydrate deficiency, that's again important. And here you have the tummy that swells up. So it is seen in population which consume very high calories but low protein, and usually in the age group of less than 5 years. So the age group is important. Marasmus less than 1 year, kwashiorkor less than 5 years. Now if we talk about our diet, what it mainly comprises of: fats, proteins and carbohydrates supply nearly 90% of the dry weight of our diet and 100% of the energy to the body. First of all, we use carbohydrate. Our body absorbs carbohydrate. If all the carbohydrate is gone, the body starts to absorb protein. Fats. If all the fats is gone, then it would start eating up from the protein, and there is where you have the issues of protein deficiency disorders that occur. The next important thing is, be it carbohydrate, fat or protein, you have a lot of important calorific values that is needed to be understood. Now, calorific value, what it actually is. Calorific value simply implies the heat which is required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So, how much heat would be required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius is measured as calorie or joules and is not known as the calorific value. So, for carbohydrates, it's around 4.1 kilocalories per gram. That's for carbohydrates. For proteins, it is 5.65, and for fats, it's much higher, 9.45. So, these values for the calorific value of carbohydrate, protein and fats are again important. So, those were some of the key things that we have discussed in this chapter. A very important chapter for MCQ purpose. In the next topic, we would be covering and discussing questions related to the digestive system and what are the probable questions that could be part of your examination section. So, stay tuned for our next class where we would be discussing the multiple choice questions based on this. Have a wonderful day ahead.